Before we go on, a little humour, because politics so bloody depressing and futile, and I think we deserve a little break. Having curiously observed how many thousands more French people watched the European Football Cup than how many went out into the streets to defend their working rights in 2016, I thought up another equally ridiculous constitution. I call it Le Constitution, and it goes like this. All decisions will be taken on footerendums. The subject is debated on the internet for a week to no good end, and then there is a match on Sunday afternoon. The yesers play the noers, and after 90 minutes and maybe a few really stressful penalty shootouts and extra time, the political decision is taken based on the final score. Now, for this to work, the referee will have to be somebody who really doesn't give a fuck, but don't forget we've got lots of those waiting to queue up for the bus to Mars. Now, this way would at least ensure that everybody took a vague interest in what was going on. Popping down to the pub after lunch on Sunday, we'd be able to watch a bit of photocracy and scream and shout blue murder as we see the world's future decided by 22 pairs of great-lunking boots, and we could at least replace the McDonald's and Coca-Cola ads around the pitch with political slogans. You even get a great campaign slogan to bring about this new system. That's 200 years of deciding with our heads to no good effect. Let's try using our feet instead and see if that works any better. It's a bit long for posters and t-shirts, I admit, but you get the idea. And so, moving on. Economics. Now, when unities of exchange cease to represent wealth and become a product in their own right, a civilization is only a few hundred years away from total failure. The universal revenue is an idea that is filtering down slowly from Scandinavia, and it does seem to be quite a good idea, even though it is now hotly debated by the left and the right. Yet again, if we let the hidden hand put the idea into place, it will of course become an awful twisted tool for bludgeoning humanity for another 200 years. Heavily taxing the big fish, and especially anybody providing us with problems like oil companies, banks, seed patenters, arms manufacturers, national media corporations, fizzy soft drinks manufacturers, Haribo, car manufacturing companies that insist on bringing out 6 new models every year, and any kind of hardware that is not going to last 50 years or more, we could provisionally not only fund the foundation of a universal wage, but also the healthcare, education, public service, the roads, and all that stuff. We could call it quite simply the shit tax. If it's shit, we tax the bollocks out of it. Now, we all know very well that the US war budget for 1 year alone is enough to put the world straight and back on its feet, and Geoff Lawton, the permaculture designer at the head of the Institute of Australia, worked out that just all of the American army soldiers and their toys for 1 year would be enough to implement a total redesign of the entire continent. Careful, Jeff, that may well be the One Ring from Lord of the Rings tempting you like it did Samwise. By offering financial freedom to the small, the family-sized business and the local players that do no harm, and then by setting a few limits to size, and not by blind or dogmatic decree, but by simple taxing thresholds where there is a choice, I think it would redress the playing field and we would see just how good people can be. The idea again is to construct an economic policy that reflects the pattern of a tree. The aim is to maintain the leaves of the tree at a certain size, and as long as they are prepared to be leaves, let them fucking get on with it. Because without the leaves, the tree is dead. So let's stop pumping the leaves for all they're worth, and let's build a real live tree. So, just for argument's sake, but remember this is just for simulation purposes, not to be taken literally, let's say that everyone receives £800, dollars or euros a month, no matter what they do or where they are. And this allows first and foremost for synchronicity to function. This allows each human being to be able to research and develop their niche on a level playing field, but it also allows shutting up shop and going off to help your sister feed her 6 kids because she broke her leg, or it allows you to gallivant off to learn this or that method from such and such wherever, whenever. This is the basic freedom we need to function naturally. There's no housing benefit, there's no unemployment benefit, there's no handicap or fuel for the elderly benefit, although the severely handicapped will probably need some extra help. It's just one universal revenue for every citizen, and that will at least silence a good part of the right wing who are mostly just jealous because they always take taxes so bloody personally because they feel that they have directly funded the whole fucking welfare system, and completely deny, of course, that they might have filled the pockets of banks and arms dealers or have been directly responsible for financing the death deaths of 100 people in Syria this morning. This way there are no forms to fill in, no special cases, and we all start off perfectly equal, just like socialism wants us to be. There's just a social security number handed out to you at 16 and a state bank account, and every month the minimum wage falls in and you get your money. The end. From there on in, you can either bum it on the minimum, or you can explore your potential and develop an activity and fill in another niche and earn up to, say, a further £1,200, dollars or euros a month without paying a single penny to the state, as long as what you do is not considered as being under the heading of the shit tax. Or you could go on to self-resource from a small plot of land and so contribute actively to the local ecology, carbon catching, biodiversity, etc., which nobody gives us any credit for when we decide to live on nothing and do this in our daily lives. This lets every person earn up to £24,000, euros, dollars a year and keeps the economy flowing nicely. Don't forget, we are also aiming for local organic produce everywhere. We'll be coming to that in a bit. And real health through real education. So the health budget should dwindle down to a few sacks of plaster of Paris for the odd broken leg. Now, if above that threshold you are then taxed, and let's make it hard, let's say that half of everything you earn after the £24,001 dollar or euro goes into the pot for the common good, unless you reinvest your excess money directly into your own projects or other projects around you, and that those projects are considered yet again as not being under the heading of the shit tax. Taxing, or imposition as it is also called, is supposed to be the imposition of solidarity. If we could be solid amongst ourselves of our own accord, it wouldn't need imposing, would it? Now, this also keeps the administrative class down to a bare minimum, because when you have the administrative class having too much power, they then go on to create more and more needs for administrators to keep their particular herd nice and big, and we get rather polluted with red tape and legal bunk, and trees start to disappear to make lots of paper. All personal individual incomes should also be capped off somewhere, and I'd suggest around £100,000, dollars or euros a year. Whatever the thresholds we decide, it should be simple, it should be clean, it should be overall and applied to everybody, and it should allow leaves to be leaves and keep civil servant administrative populations down to a reasonable level, because everybody knows where they stand and the system does what it says on the tin, and the tin is in plain view for all to see. Then there's no multitude of allergy-provoking forms to fill in for this help, that label, this benefit, that tax break, and no secret legal loopholes written into the system exclusively for the big fish and publicly displayed under the carpet of the broom cupboard of the town hall. But in amongst all this leafy freedom, there is as well the choice to go on and become a branch. It's not disallowed, but a branch requires wood and strength, and so must be able to support the leaves it pretends to be able to support. So if, say, after 5 employees, you then have to start paying some kind of social charges on your workers, but then under 5, it's just considered great that you created local paid activity for other people less capable than you, each burgeoning business can flourish with ease, and by the time it has to be taxed, it can contribute with ease. This way we can really start to celebrate our differences from one end of the scale in the humanosphere to the other, and we would also choose to create or participate in activities that we fucking enjoy, and I think we might actually start to get along really nicely. It's all about ecological niches in the humanosphere. Now, as and when very strong and innovative characters emerge, they must of course be watched. We must learn from history, otherwise history has been a complete waste of that thing we call time. One of the benefits of industrialisation is that it allows very high throughput. This means more objects produced over time, and so more profits made on the backs of the workers, but don't forget, it cannot be made without the ingenious infrastructure created by the entrepreneur. It is completely normal that the entrepreneur takes a bigger cut than the guy at the end of the line putting the object into a cardboard box. The entrepreneur developed the idea, took risks, made it float, found a marketplace, made the work safe, chose the size of the cardboard box in which to put the object, and guarantees an awful lot of comfort for the workers. And the entrepreneur probably didn't get it right first time either, so it is normal to let them pull back the overall energy they put into the creation. it is also highly probable that the entrepreneurial type has more good ideas to develop, and if they confide their functioning projects to competent people, and preferably to the small group of workers they just created activity for, they can then free themselves up and move on to attack another problem in the name of humanity. However, the entrepreneur very often fails to fill their niche when they fail to relinquish control of their creation and wish to remain in power over every fucking thing they create. Now, this kind of silliness goes on throughout hierarchical structures where people that have attained a certain level of power decide quite intentionally to keep the brighter younger people firmly below them in the hierarchy for fear of losing their place in the monkey tree. This tendency is akin to interbreeding. All of the bright young genetics leave the pyramid and go on to do other things, and then the hierarchy becomes incredibly incompetent because the bright new blood has been ejected, and evidence of this is now all around us. However, if these people within the monkey tree were playing for the common good of the whole, they would then identify this new exciting player as potentially beneficial to the whole and help them on their way back down to the trunk, recommending to their inferiors and gladly watching them go on to fill some of the most difficult niches down below where the trunk needs to hold up the rest of the world. There are such things as loyalty, karma, faith in others, and playing for the team. But because capitalism has so completely failed in this respect, socialism has then had to be invented to impose solidarity, but then that got twisted as the imposition itself was carried out by the capitalists that were already at the top of the pyramid and just changed vocabulary and tie colour, and then we end up with this upside down structure in which we live today, which is well supported morally on all sides by all of the opposing factions and their vicious dogmas. The extreme left has this knee-jerking, vomiting reaction of screaming for an end to capitalism, but wants everybody to be employed, socially protected, and that the employees would then rule the world through syndicates, which we well know are only good for negotiating the weight of the chains we have to wear around our ankles. I recently read an awful article where the so-called anti-fascists of the hard left in France have declared permaculture and agroecology as yet another far-right movement because we are aiming for a world full of autonomous, responsible individuals working together horizontally as a whole. Now, I always thought that the notion of working together for the greater good of the whole was an idea of the left, but in fact the ultra-left have become so viciously dogmatic that anything that doesn't line up precisely with their view of how things should be done gets classed by them as being fascist. In fact, in being so furiously anti-fascist, they've become complete xenophobes themselves, and it has become the most curious of political manifestations I have ever seen. To date, in all of my observations, I've awarded the far left as world champions in throwing out the baby with the bathwater. And their main argument against an autonomous cooperative society? Where are all the jobs going to come from? What they fundamentally fail to realise is without the capitalist entrepreneur bastards they so desperately want to repress, there would be no comfortable jobs, inventions, innovations or social welfare, etc. They do philosophically saw off the branch on which they are sitting and sadly but successfully stain real left-wing values as being rather ridiculous and of course provide very effective ammunition for the far right. Now, I can at least have a conversation with somebody on the extreme right because apart from being a bunch of bigoted racists, they are quite logical in their approach to life, and the fact that I am 6'4" and have long dreadlocks lets them unconsciously assume in advance that I will ram any racist comments back down their throats along with their teeth, and so we stay on nice safe ground talking about the world mafia and how to set the playing field level again. With an extreme lefty, you cannot actually say anything outside their dogma scope without setting off enough knees jerking to set up a good cabaret night at the Moulin Rouge. Before we go on, a little humour, because politics so